Ego, the mind's biggest trick. We study the ego a lot on this channel, the false self. It's really important that we understand what that is so we can auto regulate to healthier states of consciousness that make us feel more empowered, a carefree nature, independent, autonomous, with strength, passion, all of those great qualities that a higher, healthier consciousness delivers, not the fearful survival ego that's fixed on all the possible problems that could occur, will occur, must occur. And so it focuses and filters life through that. And a lot of us we put our self identification on the ego. And so we live through its lens. Let's hear AP in the beautiful information and wisdom he has on the ego. Thank you so much for being here.
We're explaining the ego as something that takes ownership, that creates its existence through ownership of action. You were talking it from the angle of action. I was thinking if we could talk about it from the angle of experiencing itself, because you said earlier that the experience comes first and then that creates the experiencer, so to speak. And also that the experiencer and the experience arise and fall together. So that's the basic duality of the mind. But this means that there is no static or a permanent experience behind any of this. It's always just like the mirror image of the anything experienced.
Yep.
So why is there the illusion of a continuity there? Because all of us experience ourselves as static entities. We have a static.
No, that's not an illusion. That's an insistence. That's an insistence. That's a particular stubbornness, not an observation, not even a deduction. It's an insistence. See, there is something that does not change, right? And the very insistence of the ego is to claim that it is that. I am that. And that is called the truth. That which does not change and therefore, in some sense, has a continuity. If the ego accepts that it is changing every moment by virtue of its association with ever-changing Prakriti, then the ego will have to drop its claim of being that which is unchangeable. Please understand. The ego is stuck in a difficult position. On one hand, it has to say it is that which is the truth. Right? And truth alone exists. But for its existence, the ego must cling to Prakriti, because without Prakriti, the ego has no existence.
Can you guys help?
The ego can never.
Can you guys help me understand what practicity is? Translate that English for me if you can in the comments below.
Say I am. The ego always says I am P. And P can be P1 till Pn, anything in Prakriti. So the ego has to cling to Prakriti to have existence. It must have existence.
I kind of always explain the ego in this way because I think it's important for everyone who's on a spiritual journey to have their own unique perspective on what ego is. So when we were brought into the world, when our mothers gave birth to us, there was an energy around us that was untainted by anything. And as we got older, before we could speak language, we knew words. We were a very happy-go-lucky, energetic, vibrant soul, spirit. We had a spark of life in us. Then as we get older, we start realizing that we are separate from everything that is around us. Actually, children don't know that. They just experience life in its totality. And that separateness then creates an ego. That ego is really the survival mechanism in our brains that focuses on just survival, the fight or flight response. And it's all about anxiety, trepidation, superstition. It's the small inner child that's scared and petrified of the world. And this thing needs a ton of validation. The ego needs a ton of validation. And so your self-worth is very attached to the ego, and the ego can become very wounded if people don't like you, if you don't get the right praise. And so it's always searching for fuel. And it's really kind of that lower state of consciousness, that one that's really depressed, down in the gutter. And so what happens though is our self-identification gets wrapped around the ego. And so we think we are the ego. So we have all of its worries, all of its concerns, yada, 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 yada. And all the thoughts that come into our mind, we feel are us. We don't realize that thoughts are pretty much meaningless. There's really no meaning behind any of it until we, the person above the ego, you can call that the soul, attaches meaning or attaches interest to that word, to that phrase, to that, and it creates a narrative, an obsession of hyper focus on it. And what I've learned about consciousness is consciousness really is our hyper focus. And so if we're using all this stimulus that just like a stream that is passing water and we attach, or clouds of a sky, and we see clouds, and we attach a meaning to that particular cloud, where they're going to identify with it, create a self-conceptualization around it, a narrative. We're all built around narratives. Carl Jung kind of explains them as archetypes. We have all different archetypes in us. And so usually we build a narrative around our insecurities, our weaknesses, our failures, and we self-identify with a narrative that we are not good. We're very average. We don't have any specialness to us. There's no you're not a genius level thinker. You're not a hard working individual that can go through anything. You're not a person who does what he must. You just do what you feel, and you just always feel up and down all the time. You'll never be able to disassociate from that. You're always going to suffer mentally. And that's all ego driven. So again, when you get older, let's say you're 20, let's say you're 30, let's say you're 40, almost like me. I'm 39 years old, well, in like a month. But usually the older we get, the less happy we get. And we have to ask ourselves, why aren't we the same energetic, vibrant being as we were when we were 5 years old, where we just were laughing and playing and giggling all the time? That's because we've taken life way too serious. The severity of life has put a depression upon us. And that is why we're mentally suffering. We've somehow let the accumulation of decades of experience convince us of a narrative that this is who we are, this is our truth, and thus I am. Kind of in own AP's words.
Existence, why? Because truth exists. Truth exists. And the ego's insistence is that I am the truth. I am that. So the ego must first of all prove that I exist. To exist, it clings to Prakriti. But the second thing about truth is that not only does it exists unchangeably, Nitya. So the ego is in, I said, a difficult spot. On one hand, it has to prove its existence. On the other hand, it has to prove its existence by sticking to someone that is continuously changing. So the ego tells itself, stuff is changing, I am not. Stuff is changing, I am not. My age is changing. I just changed jobs. Or I just changed my shirt. The point is to prove to itself that there did exist someone unchanged even while the shirt was being changed. The fact is, with the change of the shirt, you too have changed. The ego is lying to itself.
I love this. I love that AP is really putting an emphasis on that we are never the same person. There's a Buddhist term that when you walk through a stream, it'll never be the same stream. You'll never be the same person. That's because we are a energetic vortex of energy. And that is always forever changing. It never stays stagnant. It never stays the same. And so we have a polarity in us, a yin and yang, if you will, whatever words and phrases, they all describe pretty much the same thing of where our focus or energy system is is at what level in life. Is it at the healthier states of consciousness where you feel carefree, where you feel blissed out, where you feel unburdened by life and all the scary stuff that's out there and all the illusionary monsters, and this whole thing is samsara. It's Maya. It's an illusion. But our ego wants to attach so desperately to something to feel safe, secure, alive. And all of that really has no meaning. AP says life really at the fundamental level is meaningless. So we have to attach higher evaluations of meaning to it, not from a lower state of meaning. The lower state of meaning will just be all about survival, and you'll be petrified and immobilized, half alive. So many of us are half alive because we're coming and filtering life through the ego. But when you can self-identify that you're not the ego, which makes you so much bigger than your own human body, you become something much more unique in this time-space reality. It's more of a collaboration and instead of a competition, and you're like a one cell in the 7.2 or 8 billion celled human body. One cell. And so why is it so important for you to elevate and become a healthy cell? Because we're all connected. Without the earth, without the sun, you would not survive or be alive. So aren't you really part of that whole ecosystem beyond just your own form? Don't you think that there's an energy beyond yourself, you can call it your aura or whatever, that is part of your energetic body, not just a physical body? These are very interesting things to ponder. And these are the things that I love doing on this channel. And we love reacting to AP. He brings a lot of insight to different interpretations of spiritual teachings. And I love his information on ego. It makes me want to grab his book. Some of you have recommended it already, and it's definitely something I'm definitely looking forward to reading.
But the ego says, I changed shirts, which means the shirts changed. I did not. You did. Don't lie. And if you could be someone who does not change with a change of shirts, then you are home.
This is just something very hard to get because I think in a previous session.
This is always why I say that we should self-identify with the things that we want to be. Okay, the things that we want to be. Because if we're not self-identifying with things, we're going to default subconsciously self-identify with other things. The things that make us weakened, scared, worthless. So I always say that we need to attach to an arch nemesis of ourself, the version of you that is beyond suffering, that doesn't use that as an excuse to not show up for life with full vitality, full strength, full empowerment, that they've harnessed the power from within. The person who does what I call just mindful meditation, where they're not trying in life anymore. There's no need to try. It's a paradox. Life is filled with paradoxes. The more you dig down into it, that to get in elite shape, to play a sport. I was a first team All-State Kansas basketball player. I played dual sports at the collegiate level, football and basketball. And my greatest games of all time was when I just didn't try. I didn't try at all. And by not trying, I just knew what to do. I just knew what was going to happen. And I feel like that's the same foundation we need to have in life. Where yes, when I'm in the gym, there's immense effort, I guess, but at the same time, there's immense relaxation. And so another way of saying not trying is just immense relaxation, to know that it's all being orchestrated for you and you get to enjoy it. You get to enjoy it. What if we put that filter on our life? That you get to wake up tomorrow and you don't have to worry about the concerns that bog you down all the time. They're being taken care of on the other side. You're good. You're good. You don't have to worry. You're good. You don't have to try. You show up to work and you just know, like, whatever pressures that you were burdened by, they're all make-believe. You can still show up with a carefree attitude. They're going to work themselves out. You have this faith. Another word of not trying is faith. all of it's being orchestrated for you, not against you. And usually when it's going against you in a huge momentum, it's because we're trying to control everything, because we're not coming from faith. We're coming from survival, from the ego. I must do this or else this will happen. And you're never going to create, orchestrate seamlessly, perfectly, harmonically things in your life. They're always going to be at a chaotic disadvantage. That's my opinion anyway.
You also, I think you said that the ego is a choice in some sense. Now you're using the word insistence. It's very...
When I say the ego is a choice, that's the teaching. When I say the ego insists to live a choiceless and dead life, that's the fact. One thing is how the reality is. The other thing is where I want to take you to. In most people, there is no choice. But potentially the choice can exist. So whenever I will teach, I will talk continuously of choices. Please understand that when I'm talking of choices, I'm not talking of choices as if they already exist. By talking of choices, I am invoking choices. I'm not talking of pre-existing choices, because for most people, there are no choices.
I would love for him to elaborate on this, and maybe he will, but it's true. When we get in our built-in narrative, okay, we're all a narrative. We're endlessly talking about the story of our life, and we're endlessly regurgitating that story over and over and over again. And so this is why I say, to redefine your life, you have to believe that there's a redefinition, a possibility. There's choices beyond what your current present reality predicts or predicates. This was built by you. It could be unconsciously, but the reality in which you live was built by you. Thus, if you want to redefine your future, if you want to change and orchestrate three-dimensional reality, you thus have to become something energetically beforehand. And so this is why we have to have a direction. We have to have a focal point. If you don't have a focal point, you will always just kind of exist and things will never change. You have to have a big aim. You have to have a big purpose. You have to find in your core what makes you feel abundantly alive, that you would love to do, pursue, or be, or have. Like, we have a willpower inside of us, and it's to expand. I don't know why. And maybe it's to expand consciousness. Maybe it's to expand consciousness's evolution. I'm not entirely sure, but there's something beyond us that is rooting for us to advance, rooting for us to overcome the lower self, to get ahead. Because the more we do that individually, the higher we rise collectively, and the higher we can go as human beings. That's a beautiful theory. It's a beautiful philosophy. That there's so much in you, untapped potential that you can tap into by making different choices. And the first choice is to stop identifying yourself with the ego and start identifying with a future version of you that is not afraid anymore, not bogged down by memory anymore, that has been able to relinquish all of it because you know that this is Maya. It's an illusion. And although it feels real, you know deep down, there's something mystical about it, where all the severity about it, you could almost laugh at. You could almost look at how scared you've been over the dumbest stuff, or how serious you've taken your own life, and you could almost laugh at it. That's the playfulness that we want to orchestrate back into our being, back into our essence, back into our center core. That's what we want. We want that playful, carefree nature that no matter if we walk through hell, we're doing it with a smile. I appreciate you guys joining me on this video. It really means a lot. Please give it a like. Please give it a comment. That helps push the algorithm out. Also, if you haven't subscribed already, would be honored to have you as part of the community. If you're interested in booking a one-on-one coaching call and you just want a bit more tools and strategies to work on towards a better quality life, I'm here for it. I love what I do. And other than that, Thank you so much for your time and joining us till the very end of this video. And I'll catch you guys on the next AP reaction video. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.